Welcome to this week's deep dive. This week, we're really excited because we have Dale Denham, who is one of our chefs and is the Senior Vice President and CIO at Geiger. So welcome, Dale.
Thank you very much. Good to be here with you.
Oh, it's good to have you. So our topic that we're covering was cybersecurity. And of course, we went to you because you have built a bit of a reputation as being the guy in the know for tech. So we kind of picked your brain and came up with some questions. And while we're not going to cover a specific tweet right here, we're just going to kind of talk about cybersecurity as a whole, especially since Alpha Rotor jumped in and they were subject to ransomware. And one of the things that's happening right now is the rise in phishing emails and everything else. So could you give us sort of a lay of the land of what you're seeing in terms of cybersecurity issues out there that we should all personally be or professionally be super aware of?
Sure. And I'll start by saying, if you go back 10 or 15 years ago, security was pretty low on my list of things that I paid a lot of attention to because the risks were relatively low personally and professionally. They were out there. But there's just so much money to be made now that it's no longer a technical issue, it's a business issue. And we spend more today on security than I ever thought we would spend, and we're still not spending enough. So when I look at it from a personal and business perspective, they are the same, but businesses have, depending on the size, have a much bigger challenge with them. So I'm going to talk more about either a small business or an individual here. There's things that we could talk about on a business level that would probably not be useful for most of the audience. So, the biggest thing, and then truly the simplest thing that protects most of us is called two-factor authentication. And I always held back on it and pushed back on it because I didn't want that extra step. I now have it on every bank account, every email account, and Geiger requires it of all of our employees on our logins. And it simply means that when I go to log in, if it's a device it doesn't recognize, it says, hey, are you who you say you are? And I get a notification on my two-factor authentication device, application, or it can be a text message or a USB key. But if you do that, you will stop yourself from getting your bank accounts drained, things taken over. It is the number one thing that everyone should do to protect themselves. And it's easy. And most of the two-factor last for a year, meaning once I've registered the device, it stays there. But you can set it up like our practices. People have to log in at Geiger every 14 days to make sure that they haven't been hacked in one way or another. So it's a pretty significant issue.
It's true. And I think that everyone right now should just go check to make sure your Facebook accounts, Twitter accounts, Instagram are all two-factor. Mostly because a lot of the things are tied to, like your Facebook account. I think of my Facebook account and it's tied to business accounts, to Promo Kitchen's account, which would really not be good if we got hacked because of me. And so it's always one of those, like, just double check for those. And so you mentioned a two-factor application. Is there, I know most people use their phone numbers or and then like a secondary email. What is the app that you use for two-factor?
So I've used I use Microsoft Authenticator. I used to use Google Authenticator. They're both free apps, both very easy to use. I use Microsoft for a number of different reasons, but either one is fine. And I used to just use the SMS messaging thinking, you know what? Simple. The app is actually much simpler. It just says, is this really you? And you say yes, and it says, okay, and you're done, as opposed to here's the code, go type it in. So Microsoft Authenticator app or Google Authenticator, but I like Microsoft Authenticator app. And again, they're free.
Yeah, no, they're definitely go check it, because if not, Dale's going to be so mad at you because he's been mad at the team a few times, where especially Johanna, we'll just say that name out there. So besides 2FA, what are other things people should be super conscious of personally for protecting themselves?
Well, there's two other simple things everybody can do. And one, Microsoft and Mac generally do a good job of is forcing the updates on the operating system. And so even though they're supposed to be forced, there are ways that they don't get updated. So I go check any of my family's personal computers constantly. When I say constantly, at least monthly, if not every other week or two when I'm just using them, to make sure that they've downloaded the latest patches. That's very important, and it's very simple. Mostly you just make sure it's turned on and you're done. But if you're a paranoid person about security like I am, you do go ahead and check that out. And the next thing, and this is different advice than I used to give, I actually recommend buying software, antivirus software, as opposed to just using the free versions. And the free versions do work pretty well, but they don't do all the things that the paid versions do. And there's two that we recommend at Geiger to our associates for at home, as well as to our sales partners that aren't covered by our policies. And the first one is Sophos Home. You buy it, and basically you can buy a 3-year license for 10 computers for $100. And that's really cheap. And it's pretty close to the same kind of protection that we give our employees at Geiger, but it costs us a lot more than that per employee. So that's the one I recommend. The other one is Bitdefender, and I would use either one of those. I would get rid of anything else. There are other ones that are good, but those are the two that receive the best scores. And paying for it gives you so much more protection than the free ones. But making sure your antivirus is up to date is the other key to keeping yourself safe. And then there's the standard of look at the emails that you're getting. I mean, we are seeing so many at Geiger, and my family, the number of things that we're seeing out there is just trying to get people to click and give away personal information, and it puts them at risk. So you even if you have great antivirus and you keep your systems up to date, if you click the wrong link and put in the wrong or download the wrong thing, the perfect protection still will not protect you.
Yeah, and they're getting smarter and weirder at the same time. It's like
they're getting very sophisticated, especially if they're targeting you. If they target you, it's very challenging. Fortunately for you and me, we're not going to be targeted too much. I actually do get targeted a little bit because of my role at the company, but the average person out there is not going to get targeted by hackers. But somebody who has access and authority, they love to bring those type of people down.
Yeah, but even then, like my email got hacked last year, and it got a little bit insane, and just sort of trying to clear it up and seeing what they went after and updating emails and passwords and everything. It was more of a nightmare than me just staying on top of things like with two-factor passwords and everything. And
that's a great story to tell because it really is such a huge hassle. And you'll talk to a lot of people when their email account gets taken over, their bank account usually is the first thing they go after. So that's why I highly recommend two-factor on email accounts, because that is where most bank accounts are linked to. Most banks have now required two-factor, but believe it or not, not all do. And I had a friend who had $10,000 drained from his bank account through his Venmo app that he didn't have two-factor authentication turned on. And it took him 6 or 7 months to get the money back.
oh my gosh, yeah. And it's, you sort of said that small people don't get targeted. Small people get targeted because they're easy to get.
Well, when I say targeted, we're all going to get targeted. But my point about targeting, though, is somebody will craft an email to my wife that looks like it's coming from me, because they'll figure out who my wife is and they'll make it look very, very similar to a personal address. And this is called spear phishing, where it's a very targeted attack. We're all getting attacked all the time. But basically, if I get hacked, everybody in my database then gets an email or something from me, and it looks like it's coming from me. But the targeted is when they pick somebody and they investigate and do work to go say, who can I trick? And if my wife gets an email from something that looks a lot like me and says, hey, what's our bank account number? Guess what? She's probably going to put it in if she's not paying attention.
Yeah, got to make sure everyone's on top of things. So you mentioned at the top, a lot of people are small business owners and they don't have a CIO who can kind of stay on top of these things. Just as a small business thing beyond two-factor, is there anything that you would say, like, this is one thing you should be aware of?
Again, I would say keeping systems patched. It's the number of vulnerabilities out there that people don't patch that's causing most of the easy money. That's not to say that if you patch, you're fully protected, but the majority of the exploits that people get hit, it's that. I guess the other thing that comes to mind is you have admin access to your computer. And if you are logged in as person with admin access to your computer, so much more damage can be done. So on my home computer, I have a login and all my kids have a login that is not an admin login. So the amount of damage that could be done is small, where if I log in with the administrator password, it minimizes it. So for the small businesses out there, make sure no employee, including yourself, logs in with administrative rights unless they need to. And then in those cases, you actually log in as that person and go do what you need to do. And it's a hassle, but it protects you.
Yeah, everyone just right now, if your mind's exploding with the amount of work you have to do, just imagine cleaning up all the damage that could be done. And, you know, right now it's a lot of work, later it's not.
Yeah, it also hurts your reputation when you get hacked. People are a little more forgiving today than they used to be, but they still think, wow, do I want my data with that company?
Yeah, exactly. And I know that there's definitely a rise, even on the supplier side, is a lot of distributors coming and saying, these are the security levels that you need to have. So from a supplier standpoint, but from a distributor, that's something that you can offer to your client too, that's the standard that you hold. It's also super important.
It is very important. We're winning very large contracts right now because of the investments we've made in our security. And I know some other firms that are saying things they're doing that they're not. And we're not willing to say things that we're not doing, but it's expensive. And those who take the time to do everything right should feel very good about the opportunities they have.
Yeah. And that, one thing to think about right now is that you're being trusted with your clients and your staff's home addresses and contact numbers, and that's even more personal information out there. So a little bit of work goes a long way on this. But anyway, thank you, Dale, for joining us. Everyone can find you at Dale Denham across the internet, I imagine, unless you've got a secret Twitter account you can tell us about.
Yeah, that's the easiest way. Twitter or LinkedIn, Dale Denham is how you find me.
Perfect. And thank you to Maple Ridge Farms for sponsoring our deep dives. And everyone join us every week. Follow the hashtag PromoChat on Twitter, noon Pacific and 3 p.m. Eastern. So thanks, everyone.